A night like no other, the fluorescent lights of Chicago Memorial Hospital buzzed softly overhead as Rachel Morgan checked her watch for the third time in 10 minutes. Midnight had just passed. The emergency room had finally quieted down after a chaotic evening of treating flu cases and minor accidents. At 28 years old, Rachel had worked as an ER nurse for 5 years, but something about tonight felt different. The air carried a strange tension that made her instincts prickle with anticipation. She stood at the nurse's station, updating patient charts on the computer system, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her scrubs were wrinkled from hours of constant movement. Despite the exhaustion that came with a 12-hour shift, Rachel's hazel eyes remained alert and focused. The arrival, Nina Rodriguez. Her best friend and fellow nurse appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you need this more than I do," Nina said, handing Rachel one of the steaming cups. "Another hour, and we can finally go home." Before Rachel could respond, the automatic doors burst open with a dramatic whoosh. 4 men in expensive suits rushed in, carrying a 5th man between them. Even from across the room, Rachel could see the blood soaking through his white dress shirt, creating dark stains that spread across the fabric like spilled wine. "We need help now," one of the men shouted, his voice carrying a tone of authority mixed with barely controlled panic. Rachel's training kicked in immediately. She abandoned her coffee and rushed forward, her mind shifting into emergency mode. "Bring him to Trauma Bay 2, she instructed, leading the way down the corridor. Her heart pounded. It's not from exertion, but from an inexplicable feeling that this moment would change everything. First impressions as they transferred the injured man onto the examination table. Rachel got her first clear look at him. He was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and strong, defined features. Even unconscious and bleeding, he possessed an undeniable presence that filled the room. His suit was clearly custom-made, probably costing more than Rachel earned in 3 months. "What happened?" Rachel asked, already cutting away his blood-soaked shirt to assess the wounds. 2 gunshot wounds. One in the left shoulder, and another that had grazed his ribs on the right side. The men exchanged nervous glances. The tallest one, who seemed to be in charge, stepped forward. "There was an attempted robbery. Wrong place, wrong time." Rachel's trained eye caught the inconsistencies in their story. The wounds were too precise, too deliberate for a random robbery. The men's suits were too expensive, their watches too valuable, their demeanor too controlled. These were not ordinary people, and this was not an ordinary situation. "Saving a life, Nina. I need O-negative blood, surgical supplies." "And call Dr. Phillips," Rachel commanded, her focus entirely on the patient. She worked quickly, applying pressure to stop the bleeding while checking his vital signs. His pulse was weak, but steady, his breathing shallow but regular. The injured man's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. They were a striking shade of blue, clear and intelligent despite the pain. He looked directly at Rachel, and in that brief connection, something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition, as if their souls had known each other long before this moment. "Stay with me," Rachel whispered, her hands working expertly to clean and assess the wounds. "I've got you." His lips moved slightly, forming words she had to lean close to hear. "Protect yourself," he managed to say before his eyes closed again. Questions and complications. Dr. Phillips arrived moments later, a seasoned surgeon in his 50s who had seen everything in his 20-year career. Together they worked to stabilize the patient, removing bullet fragments and suturing wounds. Rachel's hands never trembled, her focus absolute. During the surgery, Detective Harris from the Chicago Police Department arrived, his badge clipped to his belt and suspicion written across his weathered face. He questioned the men in suits, but they provided minimal information. Their stories were rehearsed, too perfect, too coordinated. "The victim's name is James Bennett," Detective Harris informed Rachel after pulling her aside. "Does that name mean anything to you?" Rachel shook her head, but something tugged at her memory. James Bennett. She had heard that name somewhere, perhaps on the news or in passing conversation, but she could not place it exactly. "He's a very wealthy man," the detective continued. watching her reaction carefully. Owns half the commercial real estate in downtown Chicago. If someone tried to kill him, it wasn't random. Security detail after 3 hours of intensive work. James was stable and moved to a private recovery room. Rachel insisted on monitoring him personally, telling herself it was just professional thoroughness. The truth was something else entirely. She felt drawn to him, connected in a way that defied logic or explanation. The 4 men who had brought him in never left. They positioned themselves around the room and in the hallway, their presence both protective and intimidating. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with gray streaking his temples, introduced himself as Thomas. "Miss Morgan," Thomas said formally, his voice carrying a slight British accent. "Mr. Bennett is very lucky you were on duty tonight. You saved his life." "I was just doing my job," Rachel replied, checking James's foredrip and monitoring his vital signs on the beeping machines beside the bed. "Nevertheless, Mr. Bennett will want to thank you personally when he wakes," Thomas continued. "In the meantime, I need to inform you that your safety may be compromised." Rachel looked up sharply. "What are you talking about?" "The people who did this to Mr. Bennett have resources and reach," Thomas explained carefully. "They will want to know who treated him, who might have information. We'll be posting security outside your home as a precaution." An unexpected connection as dawn began to break outside the hospital windows. Painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, James finally regained consciousness. Rachel was beside him immediately, checking his responses and adjusting his medication. "The angel who saved me," James said, his voice rough, but carrying an undertone of warmth that made Rachel's heart skip. "I wasn't sure if you were real or a dream." "Very real," Rachel assured him, hiding her emotional reaction behind professional efficiency. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot twice," James replied with a slight smile that transformed his face from intimidating to almost boyish. "But alive, thanks to you." Their eyes met again, and this time the connection was even stronger. Rachel felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She had always been practical, focused on her career, careful with her heart, but something about this man called to something deep within her. "Rachel," he said, reading her name tag. "That's a beautiful name." "You should rest, Mr. Bennett," she said, trying to maintain professional distance, even as her pulse quickened. "Psst. James," he corrected. "And I need you to know something important. The men who did this won't stop. They'll come after anyone connected to me, anyone they think might be valuable." His blue eyes held hers with intensity. "I'm so sorry, but I've put you in danger just by existing in your life." The decision point before Rachel could respond, Thomas entered the room with urgent news. "Sir, we need to move you. Our intelligence suggests another attempt may be imminent." James never broke eye contact with Rachel. "She comes with us. Full protection." "James, I have a life, a job, responsibilities," Rachel protested, even as fear began to creep into her awareness. "I can't just disappear." "You can and you must," James said firmly. "At least until we neutralize the threat." "Please, Rachel, I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you because of me." Detective Harris appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "Miss Morgan, I think you should listen to him. We've been monitoring chatter, and your name has come up. These people are serious." Rachel looked around the room at all the faces watching her, waiting for her decision. Her gaze returned to James, lying in the hospital bed, wounded but still somehow powerful and commanding. In his eyes, she saw genuine concern, fear for her safety, and something else that made her breath catch. Attraction, connection, possibility. Nina burst into the room, her face pale. "Rachel, there are men outside asking questions about you. Security is dealing with them, but Thomas's people say we need to move now." Everything was happening too fast. 12 hours ago, Rachel had been living her normal, predictable life. Now she was being told that life might be over, that danger was literally at her doorstep because she had done what she was trained to do, save a life. "Come with me," James said softly, extending his hand despite the 4 attached to his arm. "Let me protect you while my people handle this. It won't be forever, just until it's safe." Rachel looked at his outstretched hand, at the promise and uncertainty it represented. Every logical part of her brain screamed to run the other way, to let the police handle everything, to return to her safe, normal existence. But her heart, that traitorous organ, was already reaching for him. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength in his grip despite his injuries. "Okay," she whispered, "but you have a lot of explaining to do." James smiled, relief washing over his features. "I promise you'll know everything. And Rachel, thank you for saving me. Now let me return the favor." As Thomas and his team efficiently prepared to move them both, as Nina hugged her goodbye with tears in her eyes, as the hospital that had been Rachel's second home for 5 years faded behind them, Rachel realized that her life had indeed changed forever. She had walked into work expecting another routine shift. Instead, she had found a mystery, a danger, and possibly the most important person she would ever meet. The sun was fully risen now, bathing Chicago in morning light. Somewhere in the city, people who wanted James Bennett dead were planning their next move. But as Rachel sat beside him in the armored vehicle that whisked them away from the hospital, her hands still joined, she felt something unexpected blooming in her chest. Not just fear or uncertainty, but hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. A world beyond imagination. Armored vehicle glided through Chicago's streets as morning traffic began to build. Rachel sat beside James, acutely aware of how surreal her situation had become. Just hours ago, she had been a normal nurse living a predictable life. Now she was being whisked away to an unknown destination, surrounded by armed security guards. Holding hands with a man she had only just met, Thomas sat across from them, speaking quietly into a communication device while monitoring multiple screens showing different camera feeds. The vehicle itself was unlike anything Rachel had ever seen. The windows were tinted so dark that the outside world appeared as shadows and light, and the interior felt more like a mobile command center than a car. "Where are we going?" Rachel asked, finally finding her voice. James shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. "My home. It's the most secure location we have. 24-hour surveillance, trained security team, and completely private. You'll be safe there, your home," Rachel repeated, the reality of the situation sinking deeper. "James, I don't even know you. This is crazy." "I know it is," James agreed, his blue eyes reflecting understanding and something deeper. "And I promise I'll explain everything. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. Then we can talk, really talk, about what's happening and why." The Bennett estate, 30 minutes later, they pulled through massive iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. Rachel's breath caught as she saw the property spread before them. It was not just a house, but an estate. The main building was a modern architectural masterpiece of glass, steel and stone, set on at least 5 acres of perfectly manicured grounds. In the distance, she could see a guest house, what looked like a security building, and gardens that belonged in a magazine. "This is where you live?" Rachel asked, unable to hide her amazement. "It's home," James replied simply, though she detected a note of loneliness in his voice. Though it's felt more like a fortress than a home for the past few years. Thomas helped James out of the vehicle while 2 female security agents approached Rachel. The older one, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, introduced herself as Margaret. "Miss Morgan, I'll show you to your room. You can rest, shower. We'll have fresh clothes brought to you. Mr. Bennett has asked that you join him for lunch once you're settled." Rachel followed Margaret into the house, her eyes widening at the soaring ceilings, the contemporary art on the walls, and the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of Lake Michigan in the distance. Everything spoke of wealth beyond her comprehension. Yet the space somehow felt cold and empty. Revelations over lunch too, hours later. Showered and dressed in clothes that fit her perfectly despite never having been measured, Rachel found herself on a terrace overlooking the gardens. A table had been set for 2, and James was already seated, looking much better than he had in the hospital. He had changed into casual clothes. Though his shoulder was heavily bandaged beneath his shirt, color had returned to his face. "Thank you for coming," James said as Rachel sat down. "I know this must all feel like a dream or a nightmare, depending on your perspective." "More like both," Rachel admitted. A staff member appeared with plates of food, gourmet preparations that looked too beautiful to eat. James, I need answers. Who are you really? And why did someone try to kill you? James took a deep breath, setting down his fork. I'm the CEO of Bennett Global Holdings. We're one of the largest private real estate and development companies in the country. My grandfather started the business 70 years ago with a single building. My father expanded it across the Midwest. When he died 5 years ago, I inherited everything. Rachel listened carefully, pieces beginning to fall into place. She had heard of Bennett Global Holdings, had probably walked past their buildings 100 times without realizing it. For the past 3 years, I've been in a business war with Anderson Industries, James continued, his expression darkening. Gregory Anderson wants to acquire my company. He's made offers, threats, and when those didn't work, he escalated to violence. Last night wasn't the first attempt on my life. It was just the closest anyone's gotten. Why not just sell? Rachel asked. Is a company worth dying for? James's eyes flashed with emotion. It's not about the money. Anderson's business practices are ruthless. He displaces communities, destroys neighborhoods to build luxury developments, and treats people as obstacles rather than human beings. If he gains control of my properties, thousands of families will lose their homes and businesses. I won't let that happen. Understanding grows as they talked. Rachel began to see beyond the wealth and power to the man underneath. James spoke passionately about urban renewal projects that preserved communities, about affordable housing initiatives his company funded, about scholarship programs for kids from the neighborhoods where his buildings stood. My father taught me that wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege, James said softly. Everything I do, every decision I make affects real people's lives. I take that seriously. So Anderson sent people to kill you because you won't sell, Rachel summarized, understanding dawning. And now I'm in danger because I saved your life? I'm so sorry, James said, reaching across the table to take her hand. If I could change it, if I could take back that moment and keep you safe and anonymous, I would. But I can't. And honestly, even knowing everything, I'm grateful you were there. You gave me a second chance at life. Rachel felt warmth spread through her at his touch. What happens now? Now we wait while my security team and the police work to neutralize Anderson's threat, James explained. It could take days or weeks. In the meantime, you stay here where you're protected. I've already arranged for the hospital to know you're taking emergency leave. Your rent will be paid, your bills handled. You won't lose anything because of this situation. Can't just take over my life, Rachel protested, though the words lacked heat. The truth was, part of her was relieved to have someone taking care of the details, to not be alone in this frightening situation. I'm not taking over, James corrected gently. I'm protecting someone who matters to me. The growing connection over the next 3 days, Rachel and James fell into an unexpected rhythm. She checked his wounds daily, changing bandages and monitoring his healing with professional efficiency. But their interactions went far beyond medical care. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Rachel learned that James had lost both parents in a plane crash when he was 25, that he had a younger sister studying medicine in Boston, and that, despite his wealth, he often felt isolated and alone. The weight of responsibility, the constant threat from competitors, and the difficulty of knowing who truly cared about him versus his money had made genuine connections nearly impossible. James learned that Rachel had grown up in a working-class neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, that she had worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school, and that her greatest joy came from helping others in their darkest moments. She spoke about patients she had saved and those she had lost, about the beauty and tragedy she witnessed daily in the emergency room. See people at their most vulnerable, James observed one evening as they sat in his library, a cozy room lined with books and warmed by a fireplace. That takes courage. You face death threats and business warfare, Rachel countered. That takes courage, too. They were sitting close together on a leather sofa, the space between them charged with an electricity that neither could ignore. Rachel knew she was falling for him, had probably started falling the moment their eyes first met in the emergency room. But the situation was complicated, dangerous, and potentially temporary. Rachel, James said softly, turning to face her fully. I need to tell you something. This connection between us, it's not just gratitude or circumstance. I've felt it from the first moment, like I was waiting my whole life to meet you. Rachel's heart raced. James, we barely know each other. This situation is intense and emotional. How can we trust what we're feeling? Because I've never felt this way before, James insisted. I've dated plenty of women, had relationships that looked perfect on paper, but none of them made me feel the way you do. When I look at you, I see home. I see peace. I see a future I never let myself imagine. The threat escalates before Rachel could respond. Thomas burst into the library, his usually composed face showing alarm. Sir, we have a situation. Anderson's people have located Miss Morgan's apartment. They broke in an hour ago. Rachel felt her blood run cold. Nina, my best friend, lives 2 doors down. Is she safe? We have someone watching her, Thomas assured. But Anderson knows you're important to Mr. Bennett now. He's going to use that. James stood, his jaw tight with anger. Increase security on all Rachel's friends and family? I want 24-hour surveillance on her apartment building. And Thomas, get me everything we have on Anderson's current operations. It's time to end this. What are you planning? Rachel asked, standing as well. I'm planning to stop running and start fighting back, James replied. Anderson thinks you're my weakness. He's about to find out you're my strength. A partnership forms over the next 2 days. Rachel watched James transform from a wounded man hiding in his home to a strategic warrior planning his counterattack. His team gathered intelligence, tracked Anderson's movements, built a case that would expose the man's criminal activities. But James made something clear from the beginning. He wanted Rachel's input, her perspective, her partnership. You're not just someone I'm protecting, he told her. You're brilliant, brave, and you see things differently than anyone in my world. Help me end this the right way. Rachel found herself drawn into strategy sessions, offering insights that surprised everyone. Her years in the emergency room had taught her to read people, to see patterns, to make quick decisions under pressure. Skills that translated perfectly to the chess game James was playing with Anderson. We can't just react to his moves, Rachel suggested during one meeting. We need to make him come to us, on our terms, in a situation we control. Thomas looked impressed. What do you have in mind? Rachel glanced at James, seeing the trust and admiration in his eyes. We let Anderson think he's winning. We give him a target he can't resist. The plan takes shape. You want to use yourself as bait? James said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Absolutely not. Not me, Rachel clarified. Us. We make a very public appearance together. Announce our relationship. Show that you're vulnerable because you care about me. Anderson will see it as the perfect opportunity to strike. But we'll be ready. The room fell silent as everyone processed the plan. It was risky, potentially deadly, but also brilliant. By controlling the when and where of Anderson's next move, they could turn his aggression against him. I don't like putting you in danger, James said firmly. I'm already in danger, Rachel pointed out. This way, at least we end it. We take back control of both our lives. James studied her for a long moment, seeing the determination in her eyes, the courage that had first drawn him to her. Finally, he nodded slowly. Okay, but we do this with maximum security. Multiple backup plans. And the moment anything feels wrong, we abort. Agreed, Rachel said, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. As the team dispersed to prepare, James pulled Rachel aside. Before we do this, I need you to know something. Whatever happens, however this ends, these days with you have been the happiest of my life. You've made me remember what it feels like to hope, to dream, to want more than just survival. Rachel reached up and touched his face gently. James, when this is over, when we're both safe, we're going to have a real first date. Somewhere normal, where we can just be two people getting to know each other without all this chaos. I'm going to hold you to that, James said, leaning down to kiss her forehead tenderly. Because I'm falling in love with you, Rachel Morgan, and I want the chance to spend a lifetime proving it. As they stood there, holding each other in the library that had become their sanctuary. Both knew that the next few days would determine everything. Their safety, their future, and whether the connection they had found in the midst of chaos could survive in the real world. Tomorrow, they would put their plan into motion. Tomorrow, they would face Anderson and his threats head-on. But tonight, they had each other, and somehow, it felt like enough. The public appearance, the charity gala at the Drake Hotel, was the perfect setting for James and Rachel's public debut. The event benefited children's hospitals across Chicago, making Rachel's attendance as an ER nurse completely natural. What Anderson did not know was that every waiter, valet, and guest had been carefully vetted, and James's security team had transformed the elegant ballroom into a fortress. Rachel stood before the mirror in her guest room at the estate, barely recognizing herself. The midnight blue gown James had chosen for her fit perfectly, elegant and sophisticated without being ostentatious. Margaret had helped with her hair and makeup, creating a look that was both glamorous and authentic to who Rachel truly was. "You look beautiful," James said from the doorway, stunning in a tailored tuxedo that somehow made him look even more handsome than usual. His shoulder had healed enough to forego the sling, though Rachel knew he was still in pain. "I'm terrified," Rachel admitted. Turning to face him, "Me too," James confessed, crossing the room to take her hands. "But I'm also amazed by your courage. Not many people would willingly walk into danger to protect others." "I learned from the best," Rachel said, squeezing his hands. "You've been fighting for others your entire career. I'm just following your example." Into the Lion's Den, the ballroom of the Drake Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the glitter of Chicago's elite. As James and Rachel entered together, his hand protective at the small of her back, conversations paused and heads turned. The story of James Bennett, appearing publicly with an unknown woman after surviving an assassination attempt, was exactly the kind of gossip that fueled high society. Thomas's a voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece Rachel wore. "All positions secure. No sign of Anderson's people yet, but stay alert." James guided Rachel through the crowd, introducing her to business associates and friends with obvious pride. To anyone watching, they appeared to be a couple genuinely in love, and the truth was, they were not acting. The connection between them had only grown stronger over the past week. Mr. Bennett, a smooth voice, interrupted their conversation with a hospital administrator. "What a surprise to see you out so soon after your unfortunate incident." Rachel felt James tense beside her as they turned to face Gregory Anderson. He was in his early 60s, distinguished-looking with silver hair and expensive clothes. Yet his eyes held a coldness that made Rachel's skin crawl. "Dorson," James said evenly, "I didn't realize you'd be here." "I'm a patron of children's hospitals," Anderson replied with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I believe in investing in the future." "And who is this lovely young woman?" "Rachel Morgan," James introduced, his arm moving to circle her waist protectively. "She's very special to me." "How nice," Anderson said, his gaze raking over Rachel in a way that made her feel exposed. "A nurse, I heard. How did you two meet?" "At the hospital," Rachel answered, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I was working the night James came in." "Ah, yes, that terrible robbery," Anderson said, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "You must have been so frightened, my dear. These are dangerous times. One never knows what might happen." The threat was barely veiled. Rachel felt anger replace her fear. "Actually, I wasn't frightened at all. I was doing my job, saving a life. It's what I'm trained for." Anderson's eyes narrowed slightly. "How admirable. James, you've found quite a brave companion. I do hope nothing unfortunate happens to her." "Is that a threat, Anderson?" James asked, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Merely concern for a fellow citizen," Anderson replied smoothly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I see some friends across the room. Miss Morgan, it was a pleasure meeting you. I'm sure we'll see each other again soon." As Anderson walked away, Thomas's voice crackled in their ears. "We have movement. 4 of Anderson's known associates just entered the building. Security is tracking them." Right. The trap springs. The next hour passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated movements. James and Rachel mingled naturally, always aware of their surroundings, waiting for Anderson to make his move. The plan was to catch him in the act, with enough witnesses and evidence to ensure he faced consequences. Rachel was speaking with a pediatric surgeon when Thomas's urgent voice cut through the conversation. "They're moving." "Rachel, stay where you are." "James, we need you to head toward the balcony as discussed." Everything happened quickly after that. James excused himself, walking casually toward the balcony that overlooked Michigan Avenue. Rachel continued her conversation, but her heart pounded as she saw two of Anderson's men following James into the less crowded area. "Rachel, time to move," Margaret said, appearing at her elbow. "Act natural, but we need to get you to the backup position." But before Rachel could take a step, she felt cold metal press against her ribs through the thin fabric of her gown. A voice whispered in her ear, "Don't make a sound." "You're coming with me." Rachel's mind raced. This was not part of the plan. Somehow, Anderson had anticipated their strategy and adapted. She was being moved toward a service exit away from security, away from James. Quick-thinking years of emergency room training had taught Rachel to stay calm under pressure. Instead of panicking, she assessed her situation. The man holding her was big but not expecting resistance from a woman in an evening gown. They were passing through a hallway lined with catering equipment. "I'm going to be sick," Rachel gasped suddenly, doubling over, as the man's grip loosened in surprise and disgust. She grabbed a heavy serving tray from a nearby cart and swung it with all her strength, connecting with his head. He dropped like a stone. Code red. "Rachel's in the service corridor. Hostile down." "As well," she said clearly into her hidden microphone. Hiking up her gown and running back toward the ballroom in her heels, she burst through the doors to find chaos. James was surrounded by Anderson's men on the balcony. Though Thomas's team was moving to intercept, they were seconds away from a deadly confrontation. Without thinking, Rachel grabbed a champagne bottle from a nearby table and ran toward the balcony. "Stop," she shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. "Anderson, it's over. The police are here, and they have everything they need to arrest you." Anderson spun toward her, his composure finally cracking. "You stupid girl. You should have stayed out of this." "She did stay out of it," James said, his voice ringing with authority, "until you dragged her into it. Every threat you've made, every attempt on my life, every illegal business practice has been documented. You're done, Anderson." Justice served as, if on cue, Detective Harris entered with a team of officers. "Gregory Anderson, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, extortion, and a list of other charges that's going to take me 10 minutes to read." Anderson's face twisted with rage as officers moved to cuff him. "This isn't over, Bennett. I have lawyers, resources, connections. I'll be out by morning." "Actually, you won't," a new voice said. A federal agent stepped forward, showing her badge. "I'm Agent Reeves, FBI. We've been building a case against you for 2 years. Mr. Bennett's cooperation has finally given us everything we need. You're looking at serious federal time." As Anderson was led away, still protesting, the crowd of gala attendees that had gathered to watch erupted in murmurs. James moved immediately to Rachel's side, his hands running over her gently, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? What happened?" he demanded. "I'm fine," Rachel assured him, though she was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "One of them grabbed me, but I convinced him to let me go." Thomas appeared, looking at the unconscious man being carried out by paramedics. Miss Morgan knocked him cold with a serving tray. It was the most impressive thing I've seen in 20 years of security work. James pulled Rachel close, not caring who was watching. "You were supposed to stay safe. You were supposed to let security handle it." "You were in danger," Rachel said simply. "I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." It's a new beginning 3 hours later after giving statements to police and ensuring Anderson was securely in custody. James and Rachel finally returned to the estate. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. And they stood on the terrace where they had shared their first real conversation just a week ago. "I can't believe it's actually over," Rachel said, leaning against the railing and looking out over the gardens. "Almost over," James corrected, moving to stand beside her. "There will still be trials, testimony, legal proceedings, but Anderson is contained, and his organization is collapsing. You're safe now, Rachel. Truly safe. So I can go back to my life, Rachel said softly. Back to my apartment, my job at the hospital, my normal routine. James turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Is that what you want? Rachel looked up at him, this man who had transformed her life in just 1 week. I don't know. A week ago, my life was simple and predictable. Now I've seen another world, experienced things I never imagined. More importantly, I've met you. Oh, Rachel Morgan, James said, his voice thick with emotion. A week ago, I was going through the motions of life. Successful, but empty. Rich in everything, except what truly matters. Then you saved my life, and in return, you gave me a reason to live. I meant what I said before. I love you. I'm in love with you in a way I didn't know was possible. We barely know each other, Rachel protested weakly, though her heart was singing. We know enough, James insisted. We know that we're brave together. We know that we trust each other completely. We know that when I look at you, I see my future, and when you look at me, I hope you see yours too. Rachel felt tears forming in her eyes. James, I do love you. That's what scares me. This week has been intense and dangerous and extraordinary. But what happens when life goes back to normal? What if these feelings don't survive in the real world? James smiled, reaching up to wipe away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Then let's find out together. Move in here, not as someone I'm protecting, but as my partner. Keep working at the hospital if you want. Build whatever life makes you happy. Just build it with me. That's crazy, Rachel whispered. Probably, James agreed. But everything about us has been crazy from the start. Why stop now? The promise of tomorrow. Rachel looked around at the estate that had been her sanctuary, then back at the man who had become her everything. She thought about the life she had planned, safe and predictable and small. Then she thought about the life she could have filled with love and adventure and purpose. Okay, she said finally, a smile breaking across her face. But I have conditions. Name them, James said immediately. First, we date properly. Dinners, movies, normal couple things. I want to know everything about you, not just the crisis version. Done. What else? Second, I keep my job. I love being a nurse. I need that part of my life to be mine. Absolutely. What's third? Rachel stepped closer, wrapping her arms around his neck. Third, you kiss me right now and promise to keep kissing me every single day for the rest of our lives. James laughed, a sound of pure joy that Rachel had rarely heard from him. That's the easiest promise I've ever made. He lowered his head and kissed her as the sun rose behind them, bathing them in golden light. It was a kiss that promised everything: safety, passion, partnership, and love that would last a lifetime. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. You know, people are going to say we're crazy, Rachel observed. That we fell in love too fast, that it was just adrenaline and danger. Let them talk, James said, pulling her close. We know the truth. Sometimes you meet someone and you just know. I knew the moment I opened my eyes in that emergency room and saw you fighting to save my life. You were my angel then, and you're my angel now. And you were my mystery patient who turned out to be a tycoon with a hero complex, Rachel teased. Who knew that terrible night would lead to this? The universe has a strange sense of timing, James agreed. But I'm grateful for every moment, even the scary ones, because they brought us here. Epilogue. 6 months later, Ethel walked through the new community health center, her heart swelling with pride. The building stood in one of Chicago's most underserved neighborhoods, a state-of-the-art facility that provided free and low-cost medical care to anyone who needed it. It was funded by Bennett Global Holdings and named after her grandmother, a woman who had always believed in serving others.
Dr. Phillips is asking about the pediatric wing, Nina called out.
Appearing from one of the examination rooms. Rachel had brought her best friend to work at the new center, and Nina had accepted immediately. Tell him it's on schedule, Rachel replied, making notes on her tablet. She was still working shifts at Chicago Memorial, but increasingly, her time was spent here, building something meaningful with the resources James had made available. Mrs. Bennett is very impressive, a voice said from behind her. Rachel turned to find James leaning against the doorframe, looking handsome in his business suit. A familiar warmth in his blue eyes. Not Mrs. Bennet yet, Rachel corrected. Though the engagement ring on her left hand sparkled in the fluorescent lights, they were planning a small wedding for the spring, just family and close friends.